My name is Wren Ashby. I'm 29 years old, and I have photographed 12 Christmases I was never fully in. This year, my family didn't even wait for me to arrive. They took the picture at 9 and told me to come at 10. I found out from the matching red scarves. Everyone had one. Nobody had mentioned a color. I set my cranberry bread on the counter and smiled, because smiling was my job in that house, the way carving the turkey was my father's. But this year, a stranger's comment under my sister's Instagram post was about to crack my family open like a piece of old ice. And the message a retired social worker sent me at midnight, I still keep a copy of it in a locked drawer. What she knew about me. My own mother had spent 29 years burying. Welcome back to Calm Drama Vault, where family secrets come to light and quiet women find their voice. Every week we share stories about the moment a woman stops asking for a seat at the table and builds her own. If stories like this one speak to you, drop a comment below and subscribe. Christmas, at my parents' house, ran on a schedule I was never given. I arrived at 10 with my bread and found the whole family already posed and finished. Lights on the porch. My mom's good tablecloth ironed flat as a hymn book. My sister Sadie was still holding the photographer's invoice. "You're here. Perfect timing. The light got weird anyway," she said, which was her way of saying the picture was done. I know how this sounds. You're wondering why a grown woman kept showing up. Here's the honest answer. My grandmother, Eleanor, has early-stage dementia. I'm the only nurse in the family, and I coordinate every specialist, every prescription, every fall. You don't get to quit people who need your hands, even when they only invite the rest of you at 10. So I did what I always did. I refilled glasses. I carved the ham when my dad's shoulder acted up. I apologized to my aunt for a draft I didn't cause. By 8 that night, I was home in my apartment across town, scrubbing a casserole dish when Sadie posted the photo. Red scarves, white porch railing, the caption, "Our whole family, together." I counted heads the way you count pills, out of habit. 16 people, every cousin twice removed, made that photograph. I stared at it longer than I should have, and I was about to close the app when a new comment appeared under the post from an account. With a bird photo for a profile picture. Someone typing late. The comment said, "Where's the girl from the group home?" I read it twice. My thumb went cold on the screen. I had no idea what it meant, but somehow my body did. I refreshed the page. The comment was gone. I refreshed again, and the whole post was gone. 16 scarf-wearing people vanished. I checked the time. From comment to deletion took about 50 seconds. 50 seconds at 9 on a Sunday night, which meant somebody in that house had been watching that post like a monitor in an ICU. I called my mom because pretending not to know things is a skill I never mastered. "Sweet of you to call," she said in the voice she uses on telemarketers. I asked, light as I could, why Sadie took the photo down. There was a pause with furniture in it, a chair scraping somewhere, a door closing. The lighting was unflattering to your grandmother. My mom has explained away 30 years of things with lighting. I said someone had commented something strange. Something about a group home. The silence that came back was different. It wasn't empty. It was load-bearing. When she finally spoke, her voice had dropped into a register I'd only heard twice in my life, both times at funerals. "Some pictures aren't for everyone, sweetheart." Then she said goodnight and hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding a dish towel like it was going to explain something. Here's what I knew about my mother, Diane Ashby. She kept photo albums organized by year. She ironed scarves before hanging them for a photo shoot. She had never once in my memory moved fast. People like that don't delete a photograph in 50 seconds. People like that don't move fast unless something is chasing them. I dried the dish. I turned off the light. I told myself it was church lady drama. Someone's feud about a casserole. You don't delete a picture that fast unless it touches something buried very deep. And I just watched my family reach for a shovel. At 11:52 that night. My phone lit up with a message request from a woman named Patricia H. No mutual follows. Profile photo of a garden. I almost deleted it. Then I read it, and the kitchen got very quiet. "I was your caseworker 21 years ago. Your parents told the agency you were placed with a relative out of state. I just saw you on Instagram. I have something you need to see." I read it 5 times, standing barefoot on cold tile. My first reaction wasn't fear. I'm an ICU nurse. I've been on shift for enough 3 morning phone calls that my hands stay steady out of spite. My first reaction was procedure. I checked her profile the way I'd check a chart. Patricia Halloway, Columbus, Ohio, retired county social worker, Family Services Division. Photos of tomatoes and grandkids going back 8 years. Nobody builds an 8-year garden account to run a scam. One mutual connection. Dr. Osei, a physician I'd worked cases with. A man who doesn't friend strangers, though the person was real, which made the words worse. Your parents told the agency you were placed with a relative out of state. I sat down on my kitchen floor, which I'd like to say was a choice. Because here's the thing that stranger couldn't have known. The thing that made my skin go tight. I did have a gap, 5 weeks of it, when I was 7 years old. My family called it the summer with Aunt Karen. I remembered a different house, a different school bus, a woman who wasn't my aunt at all. And then, suddenly, home again. And nobody ever explained the gap. I'd always thought that chapter of my life was closed. Apparently, someone had just found a page I'd never been allowed to read. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed doing inventory on the year I was 7, holding each memory up to the light like a syringe. 5 weeks in a house with different curtains, 40 minutes from our town, I think. A different bedroom, a woman who fed me differently than my mother did. My mother visited twice, I remembered, but never took me home right away. I asked her once why I couldn't come home yet. She looked at me like I'd asked her something forbidden. We don't talk about summer, Wren. At the time, I filed it with her other rules, like no elbows on the table. But lying there at 3 in the morning, 22 years later, a different memory surfaced. A night in that different house. Voices outside my door, low and furious, my mother's voice and a stranger's, and one word rising out of the murmur again and again like a splinter working its way out of skin. Paperwork. Paperwork. I'd always assumed it was about school records. Now I got up, turned on every light in my apartment, and pulled out the shoebox of pictures I'd taken from my parents' house when I moved out at 22. Sadie, as a newborn, dozens of photos, hospital bracelet, red-faced, adored. Me. I went through it twice. The earliest photograph of me that exists shows a toddler already steady on her feet, standing at the edge of a cousin pile in somebody's backyard, 14 months old, maybe more. There is no picture of me as a newborn. There is no picture of my mother pregnant with me. I had never once noticed. Now it was all I could see. Tuesday, I drove to my parents' house while my mom was at her book club, because my grandmother needed her blood pressure checked, and I needed an alibi, and only one of those was on the calendar. Grandma Eleanor lives in the converted den, 81 years old, dementia slowly sanding her down. While her cuff inflated, I said I wanted to pull some old photos for her birthday next month, and she waved a trembling hand toward the hall closet like a queen granting lands. The albums stood in a row, spines labeled in my mother's handwriting. 1996, 1997, Sadie's year, fat with baby pictures. Then, 1998, my year. I pulled it down and it felt wrong in my hands, too light. Like a hollowed book people hide keys in. Inside, the first few pages were normal. New Year's. My dad, in a terrible sweater. Then, where spring should have been, ragged edges, pages torn out at the gutter, glue still holding little triangles of paper, a whole season amputated. Someone hadn't just removed photos. Someone had removed the places where photos go. I stood in that hallway hearing my own pulse. And I carried the album into Eleanor, keeping my voice church soft. Grandma, look what I found. She reached out and touched the cover, and her face did something I will never forget. It opened the way faces do at a viewing, grief and tenderness with nowhere to put themselves. She looked straight at me, straight through 22 years, and she said, Marilyn. I said, no, Grandma, it's Wren. Her hand pulled back like the album was hot. Wren, she repeated, and then, so quietly I nearly missed it, no, we said goodbye to Wren. That night I answered Patricia. I kept it clinical, the way you talk when your hands want to shake. Was that you who commented on my sister's post? The reply came fast, like she'd been sitting with the phone in her lap. Yes, and she was sorry. Sorrier than she could say. Her granddaughter follows Sadie, one of those small-town algorithm coincidences. And the photo had scrolled past while Patricia was drinking her evening tea. 16 faces, and then mine off to the side of none of them, because of course, I wasn't in it. She'd seen me before, too. The family staged anything. In an older post from Thanksgiving, me in the background carrying a pie. She said my face stopped her cold. Said I was the image of somebody she'd worked with a long time ago, a girl she'd thought about for over 20 years. She'd typed the comment in a rush of anger. She couldn't fully explain to herself, where's the girl from the group home? And within a minute she was blocked. Blocked, I thought. Not ignored, not answered. Blocked in under a minute by people who claim they've never heard of her. I asked what she meant about the group home. About me being placed. She wouldn't put it in writing. Some things you say to a person's face, she wrote, so you can hold their hand when you do. It's the kind of sentence caseworkers write, and it scared me more than anything else that week. We agreed on a diner in Columbus, Saturday, 10 o'clock, neutral ground. Then she sent one more message, and I stopped breathing for a second. Bring your birth certificate, honey, then I'll show you the other one. Grandma Eleanor's birthday dinner fell on the Thursday before, and I went because her cardiologist notes were in my bag, and because I wanted to look at my family with new eyes. It's a strange thing, seeing your whole life reset. The table sat 11, and my place card, my mother does place cards, put me at the corner by the kitchen door. The seat that gets bumped every time someone brings a dish. It had always been my seat. I'd always told myself it was practical, since I was up and down helping. Anyway, now I watched the geography of it. Sadie, at the center under the good chandelier. Me in the doorway, half in shadow, easy to crop. When the cake came out, Sadie raised her phone for a selfie with Grandma. And I leaned in on reflex, the way you lean toward warmth. My sister tilted the phone away. A small maneuver, smooth as a signature. Careful, Wren, some pictures aren't for everyone, remember. She said it in a party voice, and the table laughed. And my mother smiled into her wineglass, and the laugh moved around the table like a plate everyone had to take some of. My dad, Gerald, didn't laugh. He looked down at his ham as if it had asked him a hard question. That was the moment I stopped explaining things away. Right there between the cake and the coffee. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't lighting. It was policy. Whatever the reason, keeping me out of the frame was a rule in this family. Old and understood, obeyed by everyone but me. I smiled. My job, remember. And inside, I felt something quietly change shifts. The hurt clocked out. Something colder clocked in. Something with better handwriting. Patricia Hathaway turned out to be a small woman with careful hands and the eyes caseworkers get, the ones that have watched too many case files close. She was already seated when I walked into the diner, a shoebox on the table in front of her like a casserole nobody wanted. She stood, took my face in both hands without asking, and studied me. Lord, she said, you even stand like her. We sat. She didn't open the box. She started in 2004 instead, the year I was 7, the year of the summer with Aunt Karen. She'd been a family services caseworker for the county by then. She remembered me. Case file. The girl who asked more questions than the other kids in placement. The girl whose paperwork took a strange turn. She remembered the afternoon her office called my parents' house. Flustered, because intake had tried to link my placement record to my original birth registration. Same county, same name, standard procedure, and the system had thrown it back. The birth record on file for Wren Elizabeth Ashby was flagged, relinquished. A clerk assumed a clerical error. A supervisor asked my parents quietly in the office lobby to clear up the discrepancy. Patricia was there, close enough to see it happen. I asked what my parents said. Patricia turned her coffee cup a slow half circle, a woman deciding how much to give at once. Your father studied the floor tile like it owed him money. Your mother said their daughter was placed in kinship care, and that you were a relative's child, they'd taken in permanently. And honey, I've told a lot of families, a lot of hard things. I know, shocked. Your mother didn't look shocked. She looked caught. Then she opened the shoebox. Inside were 2 photocopies, soft at the folds from 20 years of being taken out and put back. She laid the first in front of me, the way you set down a sleeping child. A relinquishment record. Franklin County Family Services. Baby girl, born to Marilyn Ashby. 17. Recipient family, Diane and Gerald Ashby. Kinship placement finalized. June 1997. I did the math I didn't want to do. My official birthday was March 1997. This record was dated 3 months later. The system had you as relinquished and replaced within the same family, Patricia said gently. And there you were, 7 years old. Spending 5 weeks somewhere else because the paperwork finally caught up to the story. The second photocopy was a page from a maternity intake log, same spring. A 17-year-old patient, initials M.A., admitted March 2nd, delivered a healthy girl, discharged alone on the 5th, and in the column for the infant, a phrase that rearranged my skeleton, discharged to family. After the day in the lobby, I went looking, Patricia said. I wasn't supposed to. I made these copies the week I retired, because a person shouldn't carry a thing like this in her memory alone. Your parents told the agency the arrangement was permanent and settled. So for 20 years, I have wondered every Christmas, Whatever happened to Marilyn's little girl? My coffee had gone cold without my touching it. I made myself look at the log page again, at the signature scrawled in the box marked witnessed. The handwriting was shaky now, on birthday cards, but I'd have known it anywhere. Eleanor, I gave myself 3 days to become a person who could sit across from my mother. And then I went over on Wednesday with a casserole and a plan. I didn't bring the photocopies. You don't open with your whole hand. I've watched enough families negotiate at deathbeds to know that. I waited until we were drying dishes, her hands busy, her guard resting, and I said I'd been going through the albums for Grandma's scrapbook. The 97 one has pages torn out, and Grandma keeps calling me Marilyn. Who's Marilyn? The dish towel in her hand stopped. 2 seconds. I counted them the way you count a pulse. When she moved again, it was all administration. Cupboard open, glass away, cupboard shut. Marilyn was your grandmother's mistake, not mine, she said, each word placed like a place card. She left before you could walk. Some people are a lesson, Wren, not a relative. I asked what the lesson was. My mother folded the towel in thirds, hung it straight, and looked at me with the level patience she saves for people who are about to disappoint her. That grief is a door you close. We replace what we lose in this family. We don't drown in it. She patted my arm, patted it like a form being stamped, and offered me decaf. I drove home with my hands very quiet on the wheel. At 11, my phone buzzed. My mother, who texts like she's paying by the letter, had sent a full sentence. Christmas dinner, 1 o'clock, family only. I read it in the dark of my kitchen, family only. For the first time in my life, I genuinely did not know whether I was inside that word or out of it. Christmas dinner was a tribunal with a roast. My mother waited until the plates were full, witnesses seated, exits covered. And then she said pleasantly, "So, you've been driving to Columbus? Small towns don't need surveillance. They have parking lots." I set down my fork and said yes, I'd met a retired caseworker. I watched the table go still. Watched Sadie's eyes flick to Mom like a passenger checking the driver. And then my mother did the thing I never saw coming. She didn't deny anything. She dabbed her mouth, laid the napkin down, and said, "Yes, you're adopted. Kinship adoption. You were family blood, and we raised you when no one else would. We saved you. Is that what you drove 40 minutes to hear?" The word adopted landed on that table like a serving dish nobody asked for. And here is the terrible cleverness of my mother. A half-truth offered whole so the matter looks closed. Sadie actually exhaled. Finally, like a secret, was a splinter now out. My dad said quietly, "Let it rest, Wren." And that, more than anything, was the wound of the night. My father, the man who taught me to check my oil and my smoke alarms, had known the shape of this thing my entire life, and had chosen the piece of the house over me every single day. I looked around at all of them and did the math they didn't know I had. If it was legal, why the torn pages? If it was kinship, why does a relinquishment record say your daughter was given up? If you saved me, I kept my voice level, a nurse's voice. Who exactly did you save me from? My mother smiled and passed the potatoes. "Eat," she said. "It's getting cold." Case closed, said her face. Her face had no idea. The relinquishment record listed a birth mother, and the birth mother's initials matched the name in the log. And that is how I came to be sitting in a diner 2 weeks later across from a retired union rep who'd known a woman named Marilyn Halstead, packing line supervisor, 20 years at the same plant, sharp as tin, kept her maiden name after the family cut her off. Address led to a small blue house where a young couple answered. "Sorry, we bought it for months back." She was sick, the wife said, lowering her voice on the word the way people do. She told us she was going home. Home. I drove back with that word in the car like a passenger. Meanwhile, my family had begun quietly to disassemble me. It came in small administrative cuts. My mother's native language, a voicemail from Grandma Eleanor's neurologist saying future scheduling would go through Sadie now, per the family's request. The key to the storage unit, where the albums lived, no longer fit, because the lock was new and nobody mentioned it. And on Thursday, my phone did the small silent thing phones do now instead of door. Wren Ashby was removed from the conversation. 9 years of family group chat gone with a tap. I sat with that longer than I'll admit. Then Friday afternoon at work, my charge nurse flagged me down between rooms with an intake sheet in her hand and a strange look on her face. "Wren, new admission this afternoon, coming into room 9. Halstead, Marilyn, 46. She hesitated the way you do before handing someone a live wire. Her emergency contact line, she wrote your name. I have walked into a few thousand patient rooms in my career, I have never once stood outside a door and had to teach myself how. Room 9. Willow Creek Hospice. 4 in the afternoon, sun coming through the blinds in stripes. The woman in the bed was thin the way the disease makes people thin. Liver. I'd read the chart with my hands shaking. Late stage. But her eyes, when they found me, were my eyes. Not like mine. Mine. My colleague actually stopped in the hallway behind me and looked between us twice. Marilyn Halstead studied my face for a long, unhurried moment. The way you'd study a photograph you'd been promised for years. Then she smiled and said, "You have his hands. Your father's. He could fix anything with those hands except his own nerve." I sat down beside the bed before my knees could vote on it. "You wrote my name," I said stupidly. "On your intake, I wrote your name." She agreed. On everything they'd let me. She'd chosen Willow Creek on purpose. The only hospice in the county. The county she swore she'd never come back to. She'd come back to it to die, because dying close to me beat living far away. She had a newspaper clipping in her nightstand, soft as cloth from handling. My nursing school graduation, class list. My name with a little pencil star beside it. She'd been to the pinning ceremony, she said, last row, hat on, gone before the lights came up, 22 years from a distance. And then she said the thing that broke me in a brand new place. "I always figured you knew about me, sweetheart. Knew and couldn't want me." I'd made my peace with that. She'd been waiting for a knock that never came, while I'd been standing in photographs I was never in. Over the next days, in the pieces her strength allowed, Marilyn gave me 1997 from the inside. 17 years old, in trouble with a boy from town. A boy with good hands and no spine, who left for the military the week the test came back. Her mother drove her to a house outside the county before she showed to an aunt's place with plastic on the furniture, and a chore list like a penance. The story the family sent home was a semester with cousins. The word they used was handled. Marilyn said she was 17 and handled. She went into labor in early March, 26 hours, and when it was over and I was clean and loud and alive on her chest, her mother and her oldest sister came into the room with a folder, consent forms. She refused. "I want you to know that," she said, gripping my wrist with what she had. She refused, first with words, then just by not lifting the pen. So they waited. 26 hours of labor, no sleep. 17 years old. A girl raised her whole life to obey those two particular faces. Eleanor held the clipboard. Diane held the baby. Nobody forged anything. Marilyn said, "They didn't have to. They just outlasted me." 3 days later, she was discharged alone, and the discharge line said to family. And the family it meant was not her. I asked why she never told anyone. She laughed one dry note and looked at the ceiling. Told them what? In that town, in that church, a girl in trouble accusing her own mother. Then she rolled her head on the pillow and looked at me, and her voice went gentle in a way I recognized from my own best shifts. "Don't spend it all being angry at Diane, sweetheart. They never let her cry for the baby she lost. Not one single day. And a person who isn't allowed to grieve turns to stone." I got the life sentence. She got the statue. My dad showed up at Willow Creek on a Tuesday unannounced, holding his cap in both hands like a man at a door he wasn't sure would open. He didn't come to see Marilyn. He stood in the hallway out of view of room 9, and he told me his piece, there quietly, between a supply cart and a watercolor of a lighthouse. In March of 1997, he'd stood in a family services office and signed a paper on a Thursday. "Your mother wanted to name her Wren, from the first ultrasound. So Wren is who we signed for." And on the Friday, one single day later, he came home from work and found the nursery already emptied. Crib broken down, wallpaper, border scraped, every onesie and rattle-boxed and gone to the church donation bin. Eleanor had done it while they were out, done it as a kindness. Her kind of kindness. He found Diane on the nursery floor, howling into the carpet where the crib used to stand. And he found Eleanor in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded. And he heard his mother-in-law say the sentence that ran the rest of all their lives. "You don't cry over what you can replace." 6 weeks later, Marilyn came home for a visit with a bundle, and left without it. "I want you to understand," my father said, and his voice came apart on the middle word. "Your mother was somebody else before." She sang. I watched her turn to stone right in front of me, and I told myself that keeping the peace was a kind of love. I was 22 years wrong, Wren. He looked at me then, first time in weeks. "You were never the wrong thing in that house. You were the proof of it." He put his cap on and left before I could decide which of us he'd come to forgive. There was one question I'd been circling for days. The way you circle a dressing you're afraid to lift. Why didn't you ever come back for me? Marilyn didn't answer with words. Not at first. She had me open the bottom drawer of her nightstand, and inside, folded in tissue like something holy, was a quilt. Small squares, careful borders, 21 finished rows, and a 22nd row, hanging half done, needles still parked in it. The colors changed as the rows climbed, lavender to yellow to a stubborn ocean blue. Like years, learning to hope. I didn't understand yet what the rows were, and she didn't tell me then. What she told me was this: she did come back once, the autumn I was 7. When word crawled through the family grapevine that Diane's girl was staying with relatives and something wasn't right, Marilyn left her shift, drove straight there, took a chance and demanded to see me at the house where I was staying. There was shouting, she said. She did some of it. Paperwork. The stranger's voice, the splinter word in my oldest memory. That was her. That was my mother's voice and her mother's on the far side of a door while I sat in a strange bedroom. Diane ended it with one sentence. Marilyn said she didn't repeat it right away. I waited. My mother had leaned in close so nobody else could hear, and said she died with you the day you signed. Marilyn drove back to her life that night and never tried again. But I sang to you first, she said, through the crack in the door while you cried yourself to sleep. Some hymn, I don't remember which. I'd carried that voice 15 years, filed under a dream I couldn't explain. It had a face now. For 9 days I had a mother. And I knew it while it was happening, which is the only mercy in this story, and I intend to count it. I traded shifts so my rounds ended at room 9. I brushed her hair, what the treatments had left of it, and she critiqued my technique like a foreman. You pull like you're starting a mower, sweetheart. We looked through the shoebox life she'd brought, photos of her little blue house, her packing line crew at somebody's retirement, a picture of a young man in uniform, grinning and doomed. She made me laugh, which I hadn't expected. Dying people are often funnier than the living. They've quit paying certain bills. When I told her about the cranberry bread and the 10 o'clock invitation, she was quiet a moment and then said, well, their loss is measurable, at least. Those sound like excellent muffins. And she taught me whipstitch on a scrap square. My nurse's fingers clumsy as a first year with a suture kit, while she supervised from the pillows. 29 years old, I said, and my mother's first gift to me is homework. First gift was the hands, she said, homework's the second. I stitched a crooked row, and she pronounced it structurally sound and morally embarrassing, and I laughed at a bedside where I'm trained not to. Then Friday, Dr. Osei adjusted her chart, and I read it before he could translate it for me, because I read that dialect for a living. Days, not weeks. Marilyn watched me absorb it with those eyes that were mine, and being who she was, she comforted me. Don't look like that, she said. I got the ending with you in it. That's the good one. Somewhere across town, my family was planning Christmas. Here is what I'd forgotten while I was learning whipstitch. Patricia's comment had been seen screenshotted the way everything is. It resurfaced in the church women's Facebook group, wedged between a bake sale and a prayer request. And by that Sunday, a woman at the salon had asked my mother, sweet as sugar-free pie, what hospital the comment meant. And was everything all right? And wasn't it funny how Wren was never in the pictures? My mother said everything was wonderful. Sadie lost 40 followers and one sponsored partnership with a local boutique, which in her economy was a house fire. And the Ashbys did what the Ashbys do. They scheduled a photograph. I learned this in the Willow Creek parking lot on Monday. When my mother's sedan pulled in at the far end, clean as a courtroom, she did not come inside. She did not ask about the woman in room 9, her own sister dying 80 feet from where she'd parked. She stood beside her car in her good coat and let me come to her, and she said, without preamble, Christmas is in 2 weeks. You'll be in the photograph this year. I waited for more. There wasn't more. No apology. No question, not even a lie. Just a slot opening. Front row. Probably. Where everyone can see you. 20-2 years, I had waited to be asked into that frame. I'd rehearsed versions of it in the shower, at stoplights. The year they'd want me. The scarf I'd wear. Now here it was. Handed over in a parking lot like a work schedule. And I finally understood what it weighed. Nothing. It was never a door. It was scenery. I'll check my shifts, I said. My mother looked at me the way you look at weather that might turn. Do, she said, and drove off. The photograph I'd begged for my whole life issued to me at last like a prop. Christmas morning arrived with a scarf on my doorknob. My mother had dropped it at the apartment early that morning while I slept. Deep red, a little card that said simply, 10 sharp. It was exactly my color. I stood in my bathroom holding it and understood that this was the closest thing to tenderness the operation would include. She knew my coloring by heart, my coffee order, my shoe size. Knowing is not loving. Inventory is not love. I put it on anyway, because part of me was still 7 years old and wanted the picture. And I looked in the mirror and practiced the smile. The one I'd been doing at that table my whole life. And my own face looked back at me like a stranger doing an impression. That's when the phone rang. Willow Creek. My charge nurse's voice. Careful, the voice we're trained to use. Marilyn had slipped in the night. Unresponsive intervals now. Breathing changed. Hours, maybe less. You know how this goes. I did know. I know that slope better than I know any road in this county. I stood there in the deep red scarf with my heart doing arithmetic, and the phone buzzed again in my hand. Sadie. Group energy, even in text. Photographer, at 10. Don't be late. Mom says front row for you. This photo fixes everything. This photo fixes everything. There it was. The family theology complete in one line. The frame heals what the frame excludes. Say cheese. 2 roads. One morning, a photograph where I would finally exist, and a room where I already did. I picked up my keys, and because 22 years of training doesn't die quietly, I want to be honest with you about what I did next. I got in the car and I drove toward my parents' house. The backyard had been art-directed, rented white chairs in rows, a garland on the fence, poinsettias, in florist buckets, still wearing their price stickers, and a photographer fussing with a reflector, while my family arranged itself by height and importance. My mother saw me in something, crossed her face that I had never once seen, there in my adult life. Relief. She crossed the lawn, took my elbow, and steered me toward the center of the arrangement. Front row, she said, where everyone can see you. Where everyone can see you. The exact coordinates of my exile, reversed and reissued as a favor. And the church ladies would scroll past next week and see a whole family together, and the woman at the salon would feel silly. And the comment would die the way comments do. I stood where she put me. Sadie smoothed my collar like a set dresser. My dad stood at the end of the row with his hands folded, and he was the only one who couldn't meet my eyes. The photographer raised the camera. Everybody hold, and through that lens, I finally saw the picture from the outside. Some pictures aren't for everyone, sweetheart. This one wasn't for me either. It was for them. About them. It needed me the way a lock needs a key. One turn. Then. I had spent my life auditioning for the role of daughter in a family that had already buried the actress. The camera clicked once. A test frame, and in the pause while he checked the light, I heard my own voice, calm as a med chart. In the register I use at bedsides. There's somewhere I need to be. The garden went very quiet. My mother turned slow, the way stone turns. Excuse me, I stepped out of the row. Everything after that happened at 2 speeds. The family frozen in their scarves, and my mother moving fast for the second time in her life. She caught me at the side gate, fingers around my wrist. Voice low so the photographer wouldn't hear, because even now the audience mattered. You walk out of here to that woman, and you are not my daughter. And there it was, laid flat between us at last. The whole architecture in one sentence. I looked down at her hand on my wrist, and I didn't pull away. And when I answered, my voice stayed in the bedside register, small and level. I know, I said. That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me. Her grip loosened a fraction. Around us, the poinsettias breathed their rented smell. I found her. Mom. She flinched at the word like it was a hand raised. I found the record. I read her name. My name. Behind her, I could see the family still arranged. Nobody daring to break formation. Sadie's phone hanging forgotten at her side. I know nobody let her cry for the baby she lost. Not grandma, not the church, not one single person, not one single day. And I have spent my whole life being sorry for it, in a language nobody taught me. My mother's face was doing something underneath its surface, ice on a pond, waiting on it, but I'm done being what you replaced her with. I took her hand off my wrist gently, the way I take hands off bed rails. Then behind us, a chair scraped, and my father stood up out of the front row in his Christmas sweater, a lifetime of peacekeeping folding itself shut, and said, louder than I'd heard him say anything in decades, I'll drive you. Nobody moved to stop him. In the rearview mirror as we pulled out, I saw the photographer, unaware or professional, raise the camera anyway. The whole family together, -1. For the last time, it was a picture of the truth. Marilyn surfaced one more time that afternoon, the way they sometimes do, a lamp flaring on its last oil. I was in the chair with my hand around hers, still in the red scarf. And my dad was in the hallway holding 2 coffees he'd bought for something to hold. Her eyes opened and found me with no searching at all, as if she'd known exactly where I'd be. "Well," she said, dry as ever, barely a breath, "look at you, all dressed up." I told her where I'd been, what I'd left, and who had driven me. And something settled in her face that I can only call finished. Then she rolled her eyes toward the nightstand, and I understood. And I brought out the quilt. The 22nd row was done. The night nurse told me later, Marilyn had asked for help 2 evenings before, her own hands past managing, and had directed the final row, stitch by stitch, quality control to the end. I spread it over her, lavender to yellow to ocean blue, and she put her palm flat on the newest row and said the thing I will carry in my chest for the rest of my life. "I counted your birthdays in stitches. 22. I never missed one. A row a year, sewn in a little blue house 40 minutes away. Birthdays for a daughter she wasn't allowed to know." While across the county, another woman lit candles on a date that marked the closing of a file. 2 mothers keeping 2 calendars for 1 girl. I lay down next to her on the narrow bed, careful of the lines, my head against her shoulder, and I told her about all of them. 22 birthdays as I'd actually lived them. And somewhere in the telling, I said the word I'd been saving, Mom. She squeezed my hand once, deliberate. A message in it. Marilyn Halstead died at 4:12 that afternoon. Her hand in mine, under 22 years of stitches. March 2nd was the day my birth record was signed away. 4:12 was the minute I finally understood who had actually written it down. We buried her on a bright cold Thursday, and the funeral was small enough to fit in a kitchen. Me, my dad, Patricia Halloway with her careful hands folded. 2 women from the packing line who called her mare, and cried harder than anyone. My mother did not come. I hadn't expected her to, and I'd been wrong about the not hurting part. But hurt and surprise are different animals, and only one of them was at that graveside. I gave the eulogy, if you can call it that. I kept it short. I said, I spent my whole life nursing people, so somebody would let me stay. She let me stay for free. Patricia nodded like a woman hearing a diagnosis confirmed. Afterward, sorting Marilyn's things, a life that fit in 3 boxes, and I've seen enough estates to know that's not a measure of anything. I found a rubber-banded bundle at the bottom of her sewing basket. Birthday cards, 22 of them, 1 for every year of me, stamped, addressed to the Ashby house, in her neat, careful hand. Each one wearing the same red stamp, returned to sender, and under the stamp, on every single envelope, the same small verdict in my mother's handwriting, small and disciplined and absolutely certain. No such person. I sat on Marilyn's floor and held 22 birthdays that had tried to reach me and been turned back at the border. And I want to tell you, I raged. But what I felt was quieter and larger. Every card had been mailed. Every card had been refused. And every card had been kept. She'd saved them all, sealed, so that someday I would know I had been written to. I didn't burn them. I put them in the box next to Patricia's shoebox. Evidence of nothing prosecutable. Proof of everything. Some archives don't convict anybody. They just tell you at last who loved you. Here's what the aftermath actually looked like. Because life is not a courtroom, and nobody handed down a verdict, I filed a simple name change at the county clerk's office, 1 filing fee and a notary stamp, Wren Halstead Ashby. The clerk didn't even look up. I kept Ashby. 22 years happened, and my dad is an Ashby, and he'd earned his syllable back. I started visiting the little blue house on the anniversary. The couple lets me sit in the backyard a while, and I told the yard the truth. You deserve somebody to remember you, so I'll do it for both our mothers. The Ashbys did not collapse. That only happens in movies. They posted a family photo that Christmas, 16 people, well lit, and the church ladies moved on to fresher scandals, and Sadie lost the boutique partnership and gained it back by spring. The machine that raised me kept running. Machines do. But my dad comes to my apartment every Thursday now. He shows up with his toolbox and finds things to fix that aren't broken, tightens hinges that never squeaked, and we drink coffee in the kitchen, and sometimes we talk about Marilyn, and sometimes we talk about torque, and both conversations are love. He apologized exactly once, properly, hands flat on my table like a man taking an oath. I told him what I'd learned at 100 bedsides. Late is a country mile from never. And my mother sends administrative signals across the distance. A forwarded coupon. A birthday text on the wrong date. I answer politely. I do not explain that the date is wrong. Some corrections you file only with yourself. This past Christmas, 1 year on, we set a long table at Willow Creek Hospice. Patients who could sit, sat. Families who had nowhere better to be, came. Staff off shift showed up carrying casseroles like passports. Somebody's grandson brought a Polaroid camera. And the pictures went around the table hand to hand, still developing, and everybody was in them. Wheelchairs, forepoles, bad angles, red eyes, all of it. Everyone. Nobody arranged us by height. On my office wall, where the diplomas are supposed to go, hangs a quilt with 22 rows. If I've learned anything worth passing down the row, it's this. Family isn't the people who put you in the picture. It's the people who never needed a photograph to prove you were there. If this story stayed with you, the record with her name on it, 22 birthdays counted in stitches, the door that finally closed behind me, share it with someone who's still standing outside the frame waiting to be asked in. And if you believe love should never have to be earned, subscribe to Calm Drama Vault. There are more quiet women finding their voice here every week. And one of them might sound like you.